Continuing in Proverbs chapter 3, beginning with verses 7 and 8. 7 and 8 are actually probably a continuation of 5 and 6, which we talked about last week. But this is what 7 and 8 says. Let me just read them together. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and never rely on what you think you know. Remember the Lord in everything you do, and He will show you the right way. 7, never let yourself think that you are wiser than you are. Simply obey the Lord and refuse to do wrong. If you do, it will be like good medicine, healing your wounds and easing your pain. The Message reads, don't assume that you know it all. Run to God, run from evil. Your body will glow with health. Your very bones will vibrate with life. Solomon, I think, wrote these 5, 6, 7, and 8 to re-emphasize the point that he was trying to make to his son. Now, remember when you were a kid? Can you remember back that far? I can't. But anyway. Remember you'd go and you'd ask your mom and dad something, and you didn't like their answer. You ever had that happen? Mm-hmm. And the first thing out of your mouth was, but, and before you could get anything else said, they would come back with, let me put it to you this way, just so you understand what I'm telling you. You ever heard that? Let me put it to you this way. Now, I don't know, like I said, if that was a situation around your house, but I can remember that several times. And Solomon is telling his son, don't be impressed with your own wisdom. Instead, fear the Lord and turn away from evil. Or, as I like to say, he says, don't think you're all that in a bag of chips. Because you're not. Don't get the big head. It's easy sometimes for us to do that. Instead, he told him, that won't happen to you if you fear God or fear the Lord and turn away from evil. See, Solomon was the smartest man that ever lived. He knew what the dangers were if you became, in your own thinking, self-righteous, if you thought you were self-sufficient, and he knew that if you did that, the benefits that God was giving you, that God was blessing you with, those benefits would disappear. They would go away, or God would withdraw them from you. So he was trying to emphasize his point to his son so that he would not get that way. Isaiah 5:21 says, woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and shrewd in their own sight. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and shrewd in their own sight. You know, my daddy used to tell me when I get that way, I was getting too big for my britches. You ever been told that? Yeah. Did you ever have to suffer what followed when you got too big for your britches? Yeah, I did too. To be wise in your own eyes means that you got it all figured out. You don't have to have anybody's advice. And it's like saying, it's my way or the highway. Heard that? Amen. To be wise in your own eyes is to be self-reliant. To be self-sufficient. Refusing even God's help. It's a sign of pride. A sign of pride. You know, you read in Daniel, the book of Daniel, chapter 4. Don't have time to read that whole chapter, but it's the story of King Nebuchadnezzar. Now, he had these dreams, and Daniel was the one who would interpret these dreams for him. So Nebuchadnezzar has this dream, and you can read about what this dream was if you read that chapter. But basically, Nebuchadnezzar got the big head. Nebuchadnezzar thought he was all that and a bag of chips. He boasted of the power that he had and thought it was his own wisdom and his own strength that he was that way. He did it on his own. He didn't have to worry about it. He didn't need God. He didn't need anybody else. And God told him in this dream, boy, you better change your ways or this is what's going to happen to you. Well, he did. And about a year later, we find Nebuchadnezzar out of his mind. Lost his senses. He's out in the barn or in the pasture. And for a year, he's eating hay and grass and everything else like all the other animals out there. Why? Because of his pride. He let his pride get in the way. Now, I'm not saying that if we do that, that God's going to do that to us today, but I promise you, God has a way of bringing us back down to earth when we get too big for our britches. And usually it's not until after the fact that we realize, I realize what I've done. And it's about pride. Pride. You know what the middle letter in that word is? I. Pride. I did this. I accomplished this. What I have is mine. I did it all on my own. I take all the credit for it. I didn't have anybody else's help. I. And Solomon was reminding and trying to get the point across to his son that, hey, that's not it. You rely on God because He supplies your strength. He supplies your help. What you have comes from God. If it wasn't for God, you wouldn't have anything. If it wasn't for God, we wouldn't be here. And Solomon was trying to drive that point home to his son. Don't ever forget it. Let me ask you, do you know a Nebuchadnezzar? Have you known a Nebuchadnezzar? Better yet, when you look in the mirror, do you see a Nebuchadnezzar? Second part says, then you will have healing for your body and strength for your bones. Solomon ties these two things together because the belief was, in biblical teaching in those days, that what your relation was with God had a lot to determine about your health. In other words, you're following God, doing what He says, trusting in Him, and He's going to take care of you. Now, I don't think that means that you're not ever going to get sick or you're not ever going to have any kind of illness or any kind of problem like that. But they believe that if it happened, that God was with you and that He would heal your body. Also, it had to do with your thinking. That if you trusted in God with all your heart, or you didn't rely on your own wisdom, then you didn't have to worry about your mind going this way or that way or wandering off somewhere where it shouldn't be and getting involved in something that you shouldn't be involved in, that you would stay on the straight and narrow. The Solomon was trying to drive this point home to his son, and I think it's an important point for us to determine and to know today. How many times have we seen people, maybe we've done it ourselves, who've gone out on their own and tried to make it on their own? I don't need your help. I don't need God's help. I don't need anybody. You know, there's one thing, I guess, about anything that God demands from us as Christians. And that's obedience. Obedience. All He asks is you follow my way. Follow my commandments. My teaching. Let me guide your path. You trust in me. And I'll keep you on the straight and narrow. Too many times, though, we want to go off on a tangent and do things on our own. And most of the time when we try to do that, we wind up getting ourselves in some kind of trouble or some kind of difficulty. Solomon's saying, don't do that. Nobody knows us better than God does. He knows what's good for us. He knows what's right for us. Even though we don't think so sometimes. So when you're out there and you're facing some decision, like that song said, when you're in the valley of decision and the adversary tells you to give in, the devil's telling you, you don't need to worry about God. He's not going to do anything. He's not going to punish you. It'll be all right. He'll forgive you. You know, part of that's true. He will forgive. But why should we have to ask forgiveness? We just tell the devil, go away, I don't want to listen to you, I'm following God. Because everything I am and who I am is because of God Himself. God gives us wisdom through His discipline. He tells us don't be wise in our own eyes. It's a principle of godliness. And He says, if you do this, it'll bring you health and nourishment to your bones. We need to spend each day of our life following God's leadership, no matter where it leads us, following His direction. Don't think we know it all, because we serve a God in heaven who knows us better than we know ourselves.